Exam ready in 60 minutes. Think it's clickbait or you think it's possible? I think it's pretty possible. We're gonna talk about it today. I think we've gotten an understanding now of regulations and what's expected. That for a firm that's doing what they need to do for cybersecurity regulations, 60 minutes is a good target. You should be able to hit this target to produce everything you need during an examination. So that's what we'll cover today. Kind of excited about this topic. If you've been to my webinars before, we tend to focus more on theory, talking about regulations and how to apply them. And today we're going to shift gears and actually say, here are some tools that you can use to go out and do this for your firm. So I come from a vendor neutral, tech agnostic background when I work with my clients. I have two goals when I work with my clients. One is to make sure their networks are secure, whatever that network means for them. And two, produce the compliance documentation around that. And I've been doing that since 2009, so 16 years now. Before I started doing this, I was on the operations side of the table, both with RIAs and hedge funds and compliance roles, security roles, and trading roles. And what I found was that, building the policies, doing all these vendor questionnaires and putting together these exam files whenever time came was just, it was taxing. It was something that, especially if, in some firms where I wasn't in control of the tech stack, it was hard to produce. So I like to keep that in mind, right? So how do we produce tools for firms that have MSPs, but still need to meet these obligations? So first half of my career, like I said, I spent on the other side in operations, and today what we're seeing is everything that comes together and how I work with my clients. And what we're going to cover today is just how to meet some of these regulations, whether you use our tools or you have some on your own. We'll kind of capture it, but we'll dive into it. So I've done other webinars where we jump in more on the regulations. And like I said, we've covered that pretty extensively, but today I want to talk more about the tooling. So I'll keep this up for a second as we kind of talk about where we are and what we're trying to meet. Specifically our 20647 regulations around written policies and procedures manual, whether that's around operations in general or cybersecurity specifically. I'm going to focus more on cybersecurity specifically today, just because that's the expertise here, but obviously 20647 is kind of broad. The new Reg SP, it's probably why a lot of you are here. It gave us a lot of new regulations that we have to tend to, and we're still in this nebulous period where we haven't seen a lot of examinations to know exactly what the SEC is going to look for. So we kind of build it to the letter. Reg SP says this, and this is how we'll tackle it today. I'm not going to cover red flags program today, just not really applicable to a lot of firms. And if it is, we've definitely got the ability for you to go in and tackle that. I'm just not going to cover it on today's webinar. And in 2042 books and records, I'm not going to cover that as well, just because a lot of what we'll cover is going to have that built in, whether you're using something like Purview or Smarsh or Global Relay. Pretty much everything that we'll discuss will have some kind of 2042 backbone to it to work on. So I'm not going to cover it in too much detail today. So let me jump over to the website. And the program we're talking about here is called the Brain Trust. So if you go to the website, mtradecraft.com, click on the Brain Trust overview and pricing, scroll down, read through it. But what you'll want to do is sign up for the free tier. Don't even need a credit card to sign up, but to get access to the materials that we're going to look at, and there's a lot of free materials, you do need that free account. So once you sign up for that, it'll take you to the library that looks like this. And we've talked about a lot of the templates before. There's a lot of templates and toolkits here that are based around the ability to assess IT, build it out, operate and train on it, prove that it's working, and how to respond to an audit. So we've always had those templates there, right? There's always been these tools that you can go in as a firm and build something that fits to yourself. But what I've been doing this year is building these into tools that make it a lot easier. Okay, so up at the top here, we have 6 tools that are deployed and 1 in beta that's going to come out in roughly probably about 10 days or so. We've got a few formatting issues left on the final report that comes out, but really easy to solve. So when you log in, the first thing I would recommend is start with the mock SEC cyber exam. If you go through this, it's a simulation just like you received a request list. A lot of these are actually verbatim scrapes from SEC examination notices. Go in, work through this. There's 30 questions, and it's going to let you know exactly where you are, what you're missing, where holes might be in your policies and procedures manual. Super easy to work through, point and click type answers, and it'll give you a good triangulation, let you know, hey, this is what we're missing, this is what we need to work on. And from there, you can move through these other tools to build that out. The most recent one we released is the Policies and Procedures Manual Builder. Okay, so when you open this up, and a side note here, nothing you do on this website is ever saved on our servers. Everything is live. We don't hold any private data. We don't collect any private data, and I'll show you how that works. It's kind of built in by design. The Policies and Procedures Manual is going to take you about 30 or 35 minutes to work through. It's going to ask you some questions. It's going to walk you through how to answer those, and talk about things like, what does your security stack look like? What do your devices look like? Do you allow remote work? It's going to walk you through these questions. And at the end, you can click Generate My PMP Manual, and that's going to produce a manual that's about 95% of the way there. You're going to want to go through it, verify it, make some signatures, have employees sign it after they read it. But for the most part, that's going to get you a nice finalized document. And say you're working through this and you can't quite finish it. Again, because I don't save data on the website, you can download your answers to what's called a JSON file. And then anytime you revisit it, you can click Resume for File, throw that JSON file back in there and pick up right where you left off if you can't get in one bite. But the idea there, again, just not to collect any information about you guys and store it. So super helpful. But again, that's going to take you a little further down the rabbit hole. Okay, because you're going to do your mock cyber exam, you're going to build your policies and procedures manual, and it's going to be very clear what you're missing. One of the biggest ones I see is the incident response plan. That seems to be where people are struggling the most. And if you know my philosophy on this, I like to build my documents to where they're half static and half dynamic. And what I mean by that is, for instance, I'll build a policies and procedures manual that says, this is how we do vulnerability scanning. And then see Exhibit A to see the actual scan. So we have the static part and we have the dynamic part. I apply the same philosophy to the incident response plan builder. So if you open this up, you can go through and build your incident response plan. Again, kind of same thing. It's going to ask you where you have clients, who's going to take charge. It'll have a few questions for you. Who are your service providers? Fill that in and generate your incident response plan. Same deal. Going to be about 95% of the way there. Needs your approval and needs signatures. And that's going to be your living document. So your policies and procedures manual is going to say, here's our Reg SP incident response plan. Keep it in a separate document or tag it in that policies and procedures manual, whichever you prefer is fine. That is the static part of it. We also need the dynamic part of it. And this spider webs in so many different ways, and we'll touch on it briefly, but we need an incident response assistant. Okay, so with Reg SP, of course, we now have to notify clients. And you want to make sure that you have the systems in place to 100% know if a breach happened, okay? Just because Sarah clicked on a phishing email and reported it does not necessarily mean a breach occurred. That could have been a failed attempt. There could have been, Sarah could have shut down her computer before any network connection was made. There's all kinds of ways that a potential compromise never became a full compromise. And you want to make sure you have the tools in place to do that, because if you don't, you have to assume the worst. I've already worked a couple cases like this where it's verifiable. A browser extension was taken over. Someone clicked on an email And we know there's been a compromise. We can see where they've gotten in, but we have no insight into what happened. There was no, intrusion detection that captured what was being exfiltrated. So you have to report because we have to assume the worst. Whereas if we have the proper systems in place, we can go through and say, okay, it didn't happen. Regardless of if it happened or not, we need a documented way on the incident response procedures and what we're doing. So I built the incident response assistant. And so what you do is you come in and you first load your incident response builder or your incident response plan that you built in the builder, load that first so it knows what your actual plan looks like. And then you can start to work through it, okay? How did it happen? What did it look like? Who notified you? What have you seen? What reports have you pulled? It'll walk you through this and timestamp everything for you so that we have, that chain of incident response of what we're doing, who's tagging out, and you can come back to this and revisit it. Again, just kind of upload what you've done so far and work with it from there. Again, we just want to build that full documentation so that anytime we have an incident response, and there's going to be a lot of them, if you're in a 20-person firm, it's probably no exaggeration, you're going to have one verifiable incident a week. That's a good number to kind of go at, right? So we want a quick way to go through and tag these, get them into our regulatory files and move on, especially if we didn't have a breach. So incident response plan, I think that's one people struggled with a lot. It's a really cool tool if you get in there and kind of grab it. Training, employee training is another one. I know a lot of people are already in the Fieldcraft training program, but that's now a part of the Brain Trust. So if you're unfamiliar with the way we train, we think about it like a science lab. Okay, so for any firm, we assign an admin, and that admin gets a portal that looks just like this. And they're going to assign training programs and assessments. And think about this like science class. Okay, we're learning about something, and then laboratory. We're actually testing it and seeing how it works. So if you training programs, we have about 99 different programs that we train on, and you can go through and select the ones that are most relevant for your firms. Do you have employees working from home? Any kind of anti-bribery policies in place. You can go all the way down. We'll do phishing training, pretty much all of the normal stuff. And then there's risk assessments. And think about this again, kind of like the lab. It's one thing to test an employee on phishing and say, did they click on a phishing email? Yes or no? Okay, that's a nice report. But what we really want to do is build a risk assessment. We want to understand, how does that employee interact with that email? Do they go over the link and see where the actual link goes? Do they look at the email header? We want to get a risk assessment. Or do they open it up and within 3 seconds they're clicking on the attachment? They're going to get ranked really high for a risk. And then of course also other stuff, forwarded emails, suspicious online logins, using AI for help. Okay, that's a big one. Can't just jump on ChatGPT and throw someone's portfolio in there and start asking questions. So we want to make sure that we go through that kind of training and present that in a verifiable way. Great thing about this program, it takes about 10 minutes to set up, and it will automate everything for you. So if you have employees that fall behind on training, it'll email them for you, get them up to date and get them back in. And then of course you have reports up at the top. And this is a blank one here, but you can go and add reports and say, hey, I want a monthly report, a quarterly report, or you can just generate a snapshot. If you've got an examiner coming today, generate snapshot, and in 20 seconds, you've got an up-to-date PDF of all your training. So that program still remains the same, though we keep adding topics to it as interesting topics come up like AI. So definitely check that out as part of it. And then this is the one I'm saving for last because it has been by far the most popular. It's the vendor due diligence portal, okay? So I started this because everybody hates doing this. There's a lot that we have to do with Reg SP now. There's a lot of collection, there's a lot of decision making, and there's a lot of documentation that needs to be done around those decisions. So I built the vendor due diligence portal to try to tackle that. Great thing about this, so I started with the Kitches map, and anyone who has ever registered or been through the T3 conference. And for you non-operational nerd types, these are kind of the big two conferences that are going to focus around tech in our industry. So it was a good place to start grabbing those vendors. And then if you have, I built this portal myself. This is an outsource. So if you have anything that's missing, you can reach out to me and we can make that happen so that we can get that information in here to have it all in your program. So the idea here, let's just go down and we can take a look at, Zox. Zox comes up a lot. That's kind of a new one everyone's putting out. Okay, so if you click on Zox, it'll go and give you kind of everything that we've done in our review. What is it? What's their security posture look like? Okay, so here we say, hey, they report that they have a SOC 2. We report when they received it. Watch out and open items. So if there's things that I can't verify, or if the vendor's not communicating about certain things and we see issues, this is where I'll put it up. And I'll give you an example. We had a client reach out about a CRM and we added it in and we go through their documentation and it says they have a SOC 2 audit, but we cannot find it anywhere. There's no proof of it. They can't provide proof of it. So we mark it and say, hey, look, they say they have one, but you really need to push them for evidence, right? Here's kind of the roughness that we're seeing. It's going to tell you date reviewed, and it'll just go through all of the information that we kind of thought was relevant. Do they use AI with client data? Do they use subcontractors? Do they have a business continuity plan? And so anytime we can verify this, of course, it's going to be a link to the source. So you can actually go and download that yourself if you want, for instance, like the SOC 2 audit. And then at the top, it's also going to say, hey, there's a few things that we couldn't figure out when asked about conflicts of interest or what licenses they maintain. We didn't get an answer on it and we weren't able to find any details. And that's okay. The idea is, to give you all the information so that you can look at it and say, yep, we are good with this. They're doing everything we hope. They're training employees. They've got antivirus in place, MDM, they're doing pen testing. They fit the bill and we're okay with it. But at least in our vendor due diligence documentation, we can show, hey, look, we've thought about everything, right? We put some thought into this. Yeah, we realize that they didn't give us a square answer on conflicts of interest, but we don't really see a spot where that could be an issue. So we decided to hire this vendor. So each one's listed here. Again, if you're missing one, just let me know. Also at the bottom, if you have like a small managed service provider, there's also a wizard that they can jump in. Takes about 5 minutes and get their name listed. Again, just so you can have everything in one portal. But the idea being, if you come up here and hit selection mode, you can go and select the vendors that are yours and print selected and create a report title. And you'll get your documentation that'll come up just like that. Again, 95% of the way there. Read it, actually think about it, review it. If you're going to have meetings with partners, record those meetings and the discussions that go on, and then sign it at the end. But this is a super easy way to go through and tackle that vendor due diligence work that's become so important with Reg SP. The last one we have coming out, again, it'll be out kind of hopefully in about 10 days or so, is the quarterly external exposure scan. Okay, so what you'll see a lot of times in the examination request is a request for a written risk and threat assessment, or they'll have it a couple different names, but ultimately a written risk and threat assessment. And that's exactly what this quarterly exposure scan is. It goes out and it takes a hacker's perspective of what your firm looks like. Do you have vulnerable email or a vulnerable website that could be taken over in some way? It's going to find those things. Do you have domains that have registered? If you're abcwealth.com, did abc-wealth.com just register as a domain? If so, that'll bring it up to you and say, hey, you probably want to investigate this. This could be a different ABC Financial, or it could be a malicious actor trying to get control. So that's the brain trust. Okay. When you log in, you get access to these tools. Again, start with that mock SEC exam. That's going to be your guidepost and tell you exactly what you need to do in order, to meet those SEC obligations on there. Kind of quick recap here. There's 20647. We've got Reg SP. We've got 2042. And what we just looked at today, we went through and we produced the policies and procedures manual. And one other thing, just to kind of tie that policies and procedures manual, again, on the static dynamic type of documents, that policies and procedures manual is going to reference that external exposure report. So it's going to say, every month we're doing an external risk assessment, and this is how we do it. And then see Exhibit C, and you'll have the documentation that's produced from that exhibit. Again, just something you have to open, actually read through, but the final documentation will be there from you. The completion log comes out of the completion log for training comes out of that Fieldcraft program. It's a separate portal, a learning management system that'll track you and your employees and allow you to be admin to that training out there. But for us, this is what I would call kind of the core foundation toolkit. Okay, if I was hired on as a CCO at a firm and they said, hey, we've got nothing, this is what I would start with. And what you're going to figure from here is you're going to know exactly what you need. Okay, policies and procedures manual says you need to do this because of this regulation, and you're going to see that you don't have that, but have a very clear way in order to get that documentation there. So definitely excited about it. Again, log in. If you go to that Brain Trust webpage, there's the free tier. That's going to get you the mock exam, the exam briefs, the guides, most of the templates, and all the articles we publish. It's always going to be free. So log in. That's the way you're going to get access to recordings, to past videos like webinars, articles, things like that. The Brain Trust Premium is $2,500 a year. You can cancel it anytime. It gives you access to everything you just saw, plus email access to me if you have questions. So if you download the policies and procedures manual and start working through something and you're not quite sure how to word it or how to frame it, you can reach out to me and I'll give you guys some help on that. And if you came away from the webinar saying, I want nothing to do with this, this is the type of work I'm avoiding, and I'm glad you showed me this because now I know what to avoid. We also do consulting where you can just hand everything over. We'll take care of it. I meet with you once a quarter, give you a full overview of what's going on, and answer any questions that you have on there. So, any kind of issues that you might have, there's certainly a way to get them solved.